Anti-vaccine protests continue to pop up around the city as Mayor-elect Adams gets prepared to be sworn in this weekend. Adams is also facing calls for a return to normal in schools after outgoing Mayor Bill de Blasio implemented more mask mandates and new testing rules.
And there's a positive case in a classroom, every child takes home at-home test kits. Every child who tests negative comes back to school. It's as simple as that. So long as they're asymptomatic and so long as they continue to test negative, they keep coming to school.
And joining us now is New York Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis, the Assistant Whip of the House Republican Conference. Also with us is Minority Leader of the New York City Council, Joe Borelli. Thank you so much for joining us today. Congresswoman, I'll start with you. Eric Adams has said he does not support large-scale shutdowns. Here's a quote. He says, quote, "We can't close down the city anytime a new variant comes up." Is there hope for a return to new normal under this mayor? What do you think?
Well, look, I think it can't get worse than Bill de Blasio. I think it can improve from here, but I still think we'll have our challenges and our fights. And that is part of the job of Joe Borelli and I, is to hold this mayor accountable and make sure that he does the things that he said he was going to do. We're hopeful, as he has said, that he's going to reconsider these mandates. We are seeing right now a staffing shortage with the NYPD, FDNY, and the EMS because vaccinated individuals have been testing positive and they fired those that were unvaccinated. So we're hoping he's going to reconsider this as well as the mandates on the private sector because we're afraid those staffing shortages are only going to get worse, which will just, of course, increase supply chain issues and in inflation even more on New Yorkers. And we're already lagging behind the nation in terms of recovery. So let's hope for the best here. Between that and issues with crime that he needs to address and education and school safety, there's going to be a lot on this new mayor's plate.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot that he's going to have to address. Joe, what are your thoughts on de Blasio's rule for school? You know, the mask mandates, at-home test kits. I mean, it's great that he wants to keep school open, but again, there's a lot of rules. And then, you know, the kids, they're still wearing masks in school.
Well, I think you did hit a point, though, that this particular new rule for testing to get back in the classroom is actually one of the more reasonable things that Bill de Blasio has proposed with COVID restrictions over the past 2 years. I mean, we want to do everything to make sure schools in general do not close or entire buildings close. So when you do have a positive case or two within a classroom, I don't have a problem with making sure the other kids who are wrestling and fooling around with the positive case are not bringing COVID home to their parents. What we have to really fundamentally and stronger than ever push back on is fighting back against the teachers union and other people out there who want to close down schools in perpetuity every time there is some media panic about a new wave. Every time there's a new wave of virus that sounds like a G.I. Joe villain, we can't shut down our schools, we can't shut down our businesses, we can't shut down our stores. If we could have reasonable, common sense approach at a micro level when we have positive cases, that's the future, and that's okay.
Right. Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, look, there's schools across the country that are already going to remote after the Christmas break. So it is good that the outgoing mayor wants to keep the schools open. Congresswoman, speaking of cracking down on kids, I don't know if you saw this confrontation between an NYPD officer and her mom and her son at an Applebee's in Queens. Take a look.
If you don't have it, then you're going to have to leave. And if not,
disgraceful. You failed. You failed yourself, NYPD. You failed yourself.
Congresswoman, they surrounded the table and kicked them out of the restaurant. Was this over the top by the NYPD, you think?
I think it's really sad that New Yorkers are being pit against each other like this and that the mayor has done this to our NYPD. Think about what is happening in our city. We have spikes in crime, murder, shootings, carjackings, so many different levels of crime that we're seeing that we haven't seen since the late 80s, early 90s, before Rudy Giuliani came and cleaned up the city. And this is what the mayor is doing with our NYPD. He's forcing them to be their vaccine mandate police, their vaccine passport enforcer. And I think that's wrong, which is why I say I hope the new mayor will actually allow the NYPD to just do their job. They want to get the bad guys off the streets. They don't want to be doing this type of stuff. So I can say that New Yorkers are hopeful that this mayor will restore the NYPD plainclothes unit and actually start going after those individuals who are either drug trafficking or gun trafficking and parts of gangs as they used to. They want to make sure that the bail law in Albany is fixed so they can actually lock people up and they stay in jail, not released before their shift is over. And they want to see the NYPD be refunded from the money that was cut from them to actually do law and order. So that's what my hope is for the new mayor. And being that he's a former cop, we're hoping that, he'll be reasonable.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, Eric Adams, he has a big problem, the crime problem here. He was former New York City Police. Here was former New York Police Commissioner Bernie Kerik talking about Adams' chances of reducing crime. Take a listen.
Adams has the ability to do it, whether he has the courage to do it and stand up to the left in these radical leftists, these Marxists. That's another thing.
Joe, in the 5 boroughs in New York City, over 1,800 people have been shot this year alone. Joe, do you think that Adams is up to this task of standing up to the left and stopping this crime surge? Because it's such a big problem in the city.
Look, I'm cautiously optimistic. Before even day one of his term, he made a decision to return punitive segregation, also known as solitary confinement, back on the jails on Rikers Island because people on Rikers Island were stabbing other inmates, stabbing correction officers. So he did show himself to be willing to stand up to the radical left in the city council on that one aspect. Whether it comes down to his vision of policing is yet to be seen. But I think Bernie's right. This is someone who does know exactly what needs to be done. He knows that we need to return these anti-crime units. He knows we need to return proactive policing to our streets. So I want to keep optimistic until he proves me wrong. But I think, like Nicole said earlier, we can't get worse than Bill de Blasio, someone who was given, essentially the key to the kingdom, the safest large city in America. And then just over the last 8 years, in combination with a whole bunch of laws at the state level, just turned New York City back into the crime-plagued capital that it once was. Tourists are afraid to come here. They're not wrong either. People are afraid to take the subways. We see video after video. And look, Nicole and I grew up on Staten Island. We know cops probably more than most people. And every single cop I know is embarrassed of that video you showed. And those cops would rather be out there arresting people, doing subway pushings and apartment building slashings than harassing some kids in an Applebee's.